This is the Digital Marketing Experts Podcast episode. No, why am I trying to sound like a radio announcer? Experts on the Wire, episode 3. Brian Dean. Hey everyone, just a few quick notes before we begin today's episode with Brian Dean. He's doing a contest, so listen through to the end of the show to see how you can win something really cool with Brian Dean. Also, be sure to check out the first 2 episodes of Experts on the Wire with Marie Haynes and AJ Cohn, who brought really awesome SEO information. Also, stick around for Friday's episode where we're going to have Ross Simmons on the line talking about SlideShare and some really awesome marketing promotion things. As you can see, I like the word awesome. I can't help it. I'm from Massachusetts. If you've been listening to this podcast so far, I know we're only 3 episodes in, but I would love to see some iTunes reviews. It will really help us show up better in the iTunes store. And I'm going to shout out to some people. I said that kind of weird. I'm going to give shout outs to some people that review us in iTunes. So if you genuinely love the show or have any feedback, even if it's negative, we really want to hear that to keep making this show better and better. Brian's also going to mention a top secret thing that he has in the works for Backlinko.com, which I don't think he's really announced yet publicly. So make sure to stick around for that as well. And with that, let's check out episode 3 with Brian Dean. Welcome, everyone, to the 3rd episode of Experts on the Wire. I'm super excited to have Brian Dean, a.k.a. Backlinko.com, here with me today. Brian, how's it going?
I'm great, Dan. How are you?
I'm excellent. So we were just chatting before the show. What do you think of the name?
I dig it. It's cool because it stands out. There's enough Entrepreneur Experts and Marketing Experts podcasts. Your name, Marketing on the Wire, stands out.
Awesome. Thanks, man. I appreciate that. So I want to jump right in. Like you probably noticed on this podcast, it might be a little different than other podcasts you've been on. I'm going to try to go somewhat rapid fire through a lot of different questions because my goal with this podcast is to provide as much tactical and specific value to the listeners as possible. And I don't want this to be a SEO echo chamber, an SEO industry echo chamber. I want business owners, startup founders, bloggers, everybody from all walks of online marketing to listen in. So are you ready to kick things off?
Oh, I'm ready to rock, man. Let's do this.
Let's rock. Let's do it. So first, let's do a quick intro on yourself and Backlinko for the people that might not have heard of Backlinko.com. What basically is Backlinko? What are your services? What is your content? Give us a quick background on that.
Well, Backlinko is an SEO training company that teaches people how to practice white hat SEO. And the main way people find out about the company is through the blog that gets about 150,000 unique visitors a month and has about 70,000 email subscribers.
Wow. So I'm glad you mentioned that statistic because I wanted to ask you, this is your chance to show us your credibility. So 150,000 unique visitors, put that into context. What might an average marketing blog receive in comparison? That sounds like a large amount.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't actually know off the top of my head. I would say I think 10,000 unique visitors a month would be pretty average to above average.
Yeah, so 150,000 uniques. That's awesome. We're going to get into some exact ways in which you did that throughout the episode. So one thing I've noticed on your site is it's actually a little difficult to find out what your paid services are on your site. It's very here's my blog, here's my newsletter. Is that something you've done on purpose?
I have, and it's not something that I'm married to. It just basically with any page or any site, you can only have so many options that you give people before conversions start to plummet. In fact, after you give people really more than 2 or 3 options, conversions start to go down. So I look at my blog as okay, what's the number one thing I want someone to do here? And basically it's sign up for the newsletter. And the number 2 is to read a blog post because then they get value from that. They remember me. They might share the content. They might link to it. And of course, if they read it, they think, oh, this is cool. I want to find out more. And they'll sign up to the newsletter. So I don't have anything right now about my products and services because I really want to focus on getting people to sign up. But it's funny that you say that because I get people emailing me all the time wow, Backlinko is amazing and you don't charge anything. how do you make money? And you're so generous, and have to remind them that Backlinko is a business. I'm not doing this as some sort of charity work, but it can seem that way because when you go to the blog, there's really nothing to buy. It's pretty much read the content or sign up. Those are the two main options of the blog. Like I said, I'm not married to that. I know some people that have even if their product isn't available all the time, they have a products page so then people can learn about the product and sign up to some sort of waiting list. And that's something that I'd be open to. But right now conversions are good, so I'm probably not going to change that.
That's awesome. That's great. And I think this ties into something I want to bring up for the business owners and people like that listening in. You mentioned having up to 3 options of things you want people to do. Ideally, maybe just one action you want them to take. But that ties back to somebody's business model. Like if somebody's offering, a product and then like a service and then software and then like consulting and all these different things, would you say an issue of maybe a business model, like somebody trying to do too many things and being too many things to too many people?
It's a good question. In my experience, definitely. On the other hand, I'm sure there's people that do, content marketing and SEO and sell software and do this and make a lot of money. So who am I to tell them that their business model is not good if they're making cash? On the other hand, most cases, it definitely helps to have not only a specialty for branding, but also, like you mentioned, Dan, for that decision-making process to just, so you know what the site's about, so people can instantly know, what am I supposed to do here? If you go to a site that does a million different things, and asks you to do a million different things, you're probably not going to do anything. So one of the first things I do when I give advice to people who run websites is usually to reduce the number of options on every page and to really distill down to what you're about. Why do you exist? Agencies are the worst at this in my experience because marketing agencies, you go to their homepage, it's like, we do social media and SEO and content marketing, It's like, well, so does everybody else. So what's different about you guys? So I love that to have something on your homepage, it just makes it very clear, this is what we're all about. And having that number one thing you want them to do, whether it's to get a quote from you, whether it's to sign up for the newsletter, whether it's to become a lead, whether it's to get some sort of audit, whatever it is, if you can make that front and center, I can guarantee you your conversions will be a lot better than if you say, we do all these million things, choose the one that's best for you.
So if a business does offer multiple things, because that does happen, would you say that they should focus one page on a unique action and like separate that out across different pages so they're not trying to sell or get one action from just one page?
Definitely. I mean, that's a great way to go about it for not just conversions, but for SEO, because then you have these different pages that are optimized around different things that people search for. And then when people land in them, not only are there fewer options, but they're going to be more targeted. So if you have a page that's talking about Twitter marketing and how you guys are like the bomb at Twitter marketing, someone searches for Twitter marketing agency in Google, finds you, they're going to be much more likely to convert. Not only are they more likely to find you in the first place because that page is optimized, but when they get there, they're also more likely to actually convert.
Awesome. So we went into some tactics right away. I want to wrap up some stuff about Backlinko and then get into some content promotion, things like that. How many people work for Backlinko? Is it just yourself? Do you have a team? How's that set up?
Well, I'm obviously the founder and CEO, and I have a freelance team that helps me with this and that, but I don't have any full-time employees.
Awesome. And this is your full-time thing. Like how many hours would you say you spend a week on Backlinko on average?
I don't know, but I spent all of them on it.
All of them. I love that answer. That's great. Even when you're sleeping, right? You're like solving problems.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's great. Awesome, Brian. So I want to jump into, one thing I mentioned was wanting to provide value to businesses. And what I mean by that is like businesses need to hire SEOs or digital marketers, social media marketers, and other agencies. I want to help them understand the nuances of that and how to better like evaluate agencies or consultants. So one thing you've mentioned in the past is that you would expect for clients to be naturally skeptical of online marketers. I guess why is that, and what are things that they should do to reduce themselves being skeptical and make sure they're making a good decision?
Well, here's the deal. I don't say that because I hate SEO agencies. I love SEO agencies. I used to run an agency. Dan, you run an agency. That's great. And a lot of my students from my online training course are agencies. So I know that there are a lot of good agencies out there. The problem is guys like you and the students of my course are the minority. I mean, I'm talking the 0.5%. There's about the 1%. This is a 0.5%. This is the 0.25% of people that actually deliver what they promise and don't do more harm than good, which is the reason that I tell people to be really skeptical about marketing agencies. Because when you're talking about social media marketing or something like that, a tweet isn't going to sink your site, right? The wrong tweet isn't going to get you banned from Twitter, probably. On the other hand, the wrong link can sink you in Google, which is a very big deal. If at the worst, the agency would do nothing, then I wouldn't tell people to be as skeptical, because they'd be like, oh, try agency A, see how it goes. If it doesn't work out, go to agency B. The problem is, by the time you get to agency C, usually a site's been penalized multiple times to the point you don't even know what penalty you have. And then you have to get agency C to try to dig you out of a hole, and then try to build your brand and do all that stuff that the agency is supposed to do. So that's why I recommend that people are skeptical, just to give some background. It's not because I don't like agencies. I actually love agencies that deliver great work for their clients, but the problem is they're so few and far between.
So for the people listening, it's not all agencies. There's a minority that deliver quality work. So how would you recommend that somebody navigate that sea of maybe bad choices? Is it just doing your due diligence, getting referrals? Like, what would you recommend for that?
It's a good question. So basically what I recommend to people is to try to do SEO themselves temporarily. So even if you want to hire an agency, which most people do, and I think a lot of people should, because your expertise is running your business, right? You don't necessarily know enough about SEO to compete. It's more complicated than ever. And that's where an agency can be really helpful. And that's most of the time that's the case. Even if you're great at SEO, you may not have the time to execute on it, and that's where an agency can help. But more often than not, the agency provides expertise that just you can't have, because you're great at the thing you do. It's hard to be great at that and SEO. On the other hand, if you want to hire an agency, I do recommend at least trying SEO yourself. Just do everything that you would do yourself. Learn it, execute some stuff, write some blog posts, do some promotion, even if you're busy. Because then when you get to the point, you'll learn 1,000,000 times faster than you will reading. It's like anything in life. When you do something, you learn a lot more. Then after even a couple weeks of this, when you start to solicit agencies and you get bids and you get proposals and things like that, you'll have a really good idea of what the wheat and what the chaff is, and you can separate the two. Because you say, hey, I was doing this and this worked great. And this proposal has that's going to be our focus. So these guys seem to know what they're talking about. On the other hand, you may be like, well, when I was researching how to build links, I saw that directories were dead. And people that aren't local businesses shouldn't build a lot of directory links. They're really old-fashioned, don't work anymore. But this proposal says we're going to build directory links straight away. That's a problem. And then you know that they're not a good fit. Without that knowledge, you're going with things like case studies and maybe even referrals are probably better. But if you just go by their body of work, what they did for Pepsi or Coke or their huge clients isn't necessarily what they're going to do for you. So it doesn't mean they're good. But if you send a proposal and you can say, hey, I relate to that stuff. I tried that worked. Or I read that this doesn't work and I tried it and it didn't work. You'll be much more informed. And then from then on, for years, you can basically hire an agency the right way.
I love that answer. Yeah, I mean, something I tell, and it's why I'm doing this podcast partially, is I want people to educate themselves. I think one of the most challenging client situations categorically that I've faced, and maybe you can relate, is when the client that comes to me knows very little about SEO, or they're not up to date, or they have a lot of misunderstandings. That makes it very challenging to work with them, because then you've got this initial gap period where you're educating and you're trying to get their mindset in place before you can even execute and do the actual work. So I love that. I have one interesting question that popped in my head. You said you did client work in the past. Do you have any just stories or anecdotes of something that just went horribly, like some kind of what's the word I'm looking for? You know what I'm saying? Like a crisis story?
Oh man, I've had plenty, because I started my agency in 2011. So it was after Panda, but before Penguin. So back then, before I knew anything about white hat SEO, I basically transitioned my agency from a black hat SEO agency to a white hat one as Google sort of changed. So I have tons of disaster stories. Like I built a bunch of links to one of my clients using this old service called Build My Rank. Do you remember that?
I've heard of it. I've never used it, but I've heard of it.
Okay, you're smarter than me in that sense, because I was definitely thinking this was the holy grail of link building. Basically, it was this giant blog network that instead of being like, hey, build me a link, what you do is you would actually write these little articles in the platform and it would automatically go to one of the blogs with a link back to your client site, of course. And I think I built like 500 links from this network to my client site. And then one day Google de-indexed the entire network. They found it and de-indexed. So I woke up one day and saw this message from them like, we've been de-indexed, like we lost like 99% of our blogs. And I was like, oh my God, like I was totally freaking out. But the funny part is that the client's rankings didn't even drop.
Really?
So I guess Google had already, algorithmically figured out that these links are worthless and they weren't actually doing anything for me in the first place. But trust me, before I figured that out, which is like, because you got to wait a while for the links to go away to see what's going to happen. And I was definitely freaking out for a while. And that was the first like, okay, maybe this is dumb. Maybe I should really stick to white hat. Fortunately, after that, I started doing white hat stuff and I was like, wow, that works. And I don't have these panic situations. So why don't I just do that from now on?
Yeah, that would probably convert me as well. That leads nicely into my next question that I had about consulting. And then we can go into content promotion. The question is, so this is a situation where you as an SEO was kind of learning. You made a mistake and you learned from it. What would you recommend, or what would you, I guess, speak to that whole premise of the fact that a lot of times we are kind of learning as we go as SEO providers or even digital marketing providers. And you mentioned at one point on a show that you did that you didn't fail fast enough, that the failing process actually makes you learn quicker and then execute better the next time. So what would you say about failing on like an actual client's website? Like, would you recommend that an SEO provider be failing fast in a client situation, or is there more of a better place and time to fail?
Well, I think you can fail in a client situation if you're doing white hat stuff, because the worst that's going to happen is like you make this huge campaign and you create an infographic or a visual piece of content and you think all these journalists are going to cover it and it falls flat. It doesn't work. So the worst case scenario is that you wasted your time and you wasted your client's time. Not good. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying this is a great thing to do. But the point is that you learned a lot of lessons along the way. I do recommend having your own properties. I know a couple SEO agencies that have their own properties, not only for just ranking them, because the idea is like, well, we can rank these clients, we can rank our own stuff, which is great because it's a vote of confidence for what they're doing. But also they're learning along the way. In a sandbox, it's not going to say, oh, client, this is what we delivered for you this month. Nothing. So we learned a lot. I hope you're okay with that. I mean, you paid us like $8,000 this month. We learned a ton. So thank you so much. Obviously, no client is going to be happy with that. But what I would do is understand your client's aversion to risk. Be like, look, we can go the safe route, do something like the skyscraper technique. Very safe. It's pretty much going to work most of the time. Versus this thing, we have this cool idea. We don't know if it's going to work, but if it does, it'll be huge. And then have them basically choose option A or B. I think that's probably the best way to go.
Yeah, I love that advice, knowing your client's risk aversion. I think that's super advice because one client might have a lot of tolerance for risk and then you can be more experimental, and the other might have a low amount of risk and then you're going to want to do something more tried and true. So I love that advice. Awesome. Let's jump into some talk about content. When I think of Brian Dean in Backlinko, I think of content as being one of your just expertise areas. It's definitely something that's carried Backlinko up into the forefront as a brand in the SEO space. So what I wanted to dive into actually was talk through with me a content creation process. I want to talk through from what sparks the idea to the research to the creation. Can we talk through like maybe an actual piece of content that you've created and the process behind it?
Sure, let's do it.
Awesome. So the one that comes to mind for me is your recent ranking studies piece of content. This was, for those of you that don't know, just Google Backlinko, probably like Google ranking factors or something like that, and you'll see it come up at the top. So you studied, what was it, over 1 million or something search results?
That's right.
Yeah. And so this to me was just a monstrous piece of content. It was very well executed, very valuable. I want to start all the way at the beginning. What was the initial seed of this idea? And then how can people that are creating content take your experience and then learn how to come up with their own ideas for content?
So with this particular one, it's a doozy. So don't be intimidated when I tell you when we get into the actual process of it. I just want to give that little warning, because this was a massive process with hundreds of hours involved. It cost $20,000 to run the study.
Wait, so it was $20,000?
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just want to make sure people caught that. Yeah.
No, that's right. So this isn't to say you need to do that. So I just want to put that out there and say, look, this isn't what you have to do well. You have to crawl before you ball. And I was crawling for a long time. And then I realized that I had this opportunity here. So I decided to push the chips in. This was one of those experimental things where I could see if it didn't go well, myself as my own client would be very upset with myself. That doesn't really make any sense, but I think you know what I'm saying.
I get it.
Yeah, I think you get it. So with this particular piece of content, I realized that some of the most linked to content, some of the most shared content online was everything related to data, especially if you could come up with unique data.
So I want to stop you for 1 second because, and I don't mind my interruptions, but I want to make sure you said you realized that content with data was linked to. What do you mean? Like you realized like it hit you one day, or like you researched it, or your experience over the years? Because I think a lot of listeners might not have that intuitive knowledge that you have.
Well, it was a little bit of both, actually. It was that I was reading I forgot what, I think BuzzSumo, they had some sort of lessons learned post. And one of the things was like, if you have unique data, you're going to get a lot of shares. That was one of the secrets, is that they obviously have a great tool, but they also did a lot of stuff like for OKDork, which is Noah Kagan's blog. They did this huge, analyzed 100 million articles to see what got shared. And they said from the lesson learned from that was that unique data gets shared a lot. And so someone actually told me, like, and they didn't tell me personally, but I read it. That was kind of like, okay, planted this seed in my mind.
So your goal, like, let's trace that back to your goal. You were looking for content to create that would acquire backlinks for your site.
Yep. And all the other stuff, shares and traffic and all that stuff. But yeah, when I create a piece of content, the number one goal is to get links, because then it'll rank in Google. People find it, find me, sign up for the newsletter, etc.
Cool. So I want to highlight that, because if somebody else's goal is not backlinks, maybe it's PR, or maybe it's ranking a keyword in Google, like the idea might be different off of that.
Definitely. Yes. Definitely. There's a huge difference between, not huge, but there is a difference between content that gets shared on social media, content that gets comments, and content that gets links. A lot of times they're very different. And I have an example of that, actually. Another post that I published, which is this big list of SEO tools, my goal for all of them is the same, right? To get people sharing it and commenting, get links and all that stuff. It's not just obviously SEO, but that's a big part of it. This post got a ton of shares. It had like 2,000 plus tweets, got like 500 comments, tons of Facebook likes, but it hasn't received that many links yet.
Huh, interesting.
So it's one of those like, well, there's not always one and the same. On the other hand, this Google ranking factor, it's called search engine ranking factors post, because then the Google ranking one brings up this other piece of content. But the search engine ranking factor study, it's got a ton of links. So that has met the goal. So there is a difference between the two. Both have tons of shares. One has a lot of links. One doesn't have that many links. So it is important to be like, okay, what type of content gets the most links if that happens to be your goal? In this case, unique data, before I published it, seemed to be the way to go.
Awesome. So we're really tying things to a goal. And these all tie to a business goal, right? You're trying to get email signups, which then convert into people buying your product.
Exactly.
Awesome. So let's continue talking through the process. So you have the idea, you know the goal, and then what? Do you just put pen to paper and start creating it? Or what's the next step after you have the idea? Do you try to come up with an outline? What's the next step for you?
So the next step was, I had this very vague thing, like create something that has data in it, which is not actionable at all. And that was sort of the seed that was planted in my mind. And then one day I was looking at these search engine ranking factor studies that people had put out. So Moz does one every 2 years that's very good, where they analyze a bunch of different factors. Searchmetrics does one that's also very good. And I was thinking, well, these are good, but what could be done better? And I realized that Moz's study only looks at 10,000 keywords. I think they may looked at 40,000 the last time, but I think I'm almost positive the last one was 10,000. It might be 40. But the point is that there's like 1 billion searches in Google every day. So 10,000 keywords doesn't even begin to scratch the surface of the keywords that get searched for. So even if, your sample size, you say it's representative, it's just not possible with that few keywords, because the pool is so huge. And then search metrics didn't reveal how many they did. So who knows? But the point was, it hadn't been anyone that did a lot. And then one day I was like, what if someone did 1 million? Still, that to keep this in perspective, that still doesn't even scratch the surface. It sounds like a lot. Like 1 million, you're like, oh my God. But there's like at least 1 billion searches every day. So over the course of a week, there's 7 billion. We did 1 million. So it's still a tiny fraction of the number of searches. But the point is, I was thinking, what if someone did 1 million? And I was like, what if I did 1 million? That would be pretty cool. I could see that doing well. So that's when I set out to kind of figure out how could this be done with no technical knowledge that I have.
Awesome. So I want to highlight something because probably 99% of people, maybe including myself, would have gone, oh, I want to do search engine ranking factors, seen that Moz does a study and other people do these studies, and then gotten scared and said, well, I can't compete with that. Moz is like one of the top companies in SEO, and they might have like just got scared away from that. So like, I think the thing I want to highlight is to not be scared if you see people already doing content that you think is great, because what's the idea that you can just do it better? Am I correct?
Definitely.
Awesome. Yeah. So you basically measured up the opportunity. So you had the idea, you have the goal, you measure the opportunity, you weigh the opportunity, and then what? So now we put pen to paper and write, or are there more steps ahead of that?
Well, this was a huge, whether it's a regular blog post or this study, research is the big part of it. So before you put pen to paper, I definitely had an idea of what I wanted the end product to look like before I even started the research. So once I had the idea for 1 million, I was like, okay, what would this look like? And basically I had the idea that we would highlight about 10 to 20 of the most important ranking factors that we found and sort of use other content that's done well as a model. So for this one, we used OKDork's BuzzSumo study that I mentioned, which is very good. And then also Moz and BuzzSumo teamed up for a study where they analyzed 1 million articles to see the relationship between social shares and links. Also did tremendously well, got a ton of links, and I found it fascinating personally. So I use those two as models of like how it would be laid out. I didn't have anything to put in like the boxes. It was just like an idea. But why that's important is that I could send that to all the people that worked on this study and be like, this is basically what I want at the end. So everyone's on the same page of like what the end will be. Kind of like 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Begin with the end in mind.
I was just going to reference that, yeah.
So I had the end in mind. Then it's a matter of filling in the blanks, which is a massive thing. I can get into it if you want of how we did it, but it was insanely complicated and expensive, like I said. Well worth it. But the point was I had the end in mind. So whatever your blog post is, you kind of want this vision of like, okay, what'll it be like? You may not have the details, you may not have but you have an idea of like, okay, it'll look like X. And once you have that, everything else informs that, and it's a lot easier to write. So for blog posts, I always use a bunch of templates. I have my own templates that I developed over the years. I never write a blog post by just like going to WordPress and bang on a blank white screen, because I begin with the end in mind. I have that template of what it's going to look like, even if I don't have the details filled in. And this particular piece of content was the same thing.
Awesome. Yeah, we don't have to get in the nitty gritty about the graphics and everything. But the thing I'm curious about is, so you have the vision in mind, the end goal, you do the research, you create the content, you do the graphics, you hit publish. And then what? Do you just walk away from it? Is there things that happen after you hit publish, week 1, week 2, month 1, month 2, that you do to keep the post alive?
Well, there's a few things that I do to strategically promote every piece of content. That's the same. There's a lot that are different depending on the opportunity. So whether it's an infographic or a list post or a case study, or this is the first time I published original data. So I kind of had to learn what I was doing to promote it, because it's very different. And I learned a lot of lessons by failing. Like I reached out to a lot of journalists for this, to let them know. And I always read, journalists love data. They love publishing data. Now, unfortunately, it's all about how you pitch and your follow-up and find the right person, all that stuff that I didn't know. So I didn't get that many responses in terms of journalists. So that promotion part was like, okay, lesson learned. Here's how you do it. Then I work with a PR guy to help me learn that stuff. But the point is that was like, this is unique. But for the most part, I follow the same plan. The first is that I do something called pre-outreach. So this is where I reach out to people before something gets published. And this is really important because when you reach out to people after something's been published, it can still work, and it does work, but it comes off as like hey, I published this thing and I have no idea what to do now, so I'm just going to email a bunch of people, right?
Yeah.
But when you email people before it comes out, they're going to be much more receptive to it because you're like, hey, I have this thing and I thought of you. It's not even possible for them to share it yet.
Right.
It's not even possible for them to look at it. It really seems like a legitimate heads up. So I reach out to people that I think might be interested. I think actually, Dan, I emailed you back in the day before I had a keyword research guide that came out. I was like, because you had just published this amazing post on advanced web ranking about this Google keyword planner thing that blew my mind. So I emailed you and I was like, Dan, that was awesome, dude. And by the way, I have this keyword research guide coming out. So that was the way. I think that's a good way to go about it. In my experience, it is because you're just asking them if they want to see it when it comes out. There's no even opportunity for them to even take an action besides saying yes or no. Then when it's out, of course, you email all the people that said, I want to see it. And if they like it, they'll share it. I don't even ask people to share it. Just say, here it is. And it's kind of a numbers game. For blog posts, usually I email at least 200 people. So I have about 100 yeses in the queue of people that said they want to see it. Then I send it, and then you get a few shares and comments. And also you build relationships. I've been in a lot of podcasts from doing this. So a lot of good things come from pre-outreach because you're showing people content that they enjoy. You know, like me and you, Dan, we're SEO guys. We're SEO nerds. Someone send us a cool piece of SEO content, we're going to be like, thanks, that was great. Even though it benefits that person when I might tweet it or link to it later. So that's the first thing. The other thing I always do is I email the email list. And this is like this very underrated content promotion strategy. SEOs always talk about like, oh, social media and SEO, they're so linked. And you know, if you have a Twitter following and you tweet something out, you get a lot of clicks and it'll help your content spread and all that stuff, which is true. But nothing beats the email list for content promotion. Your own email list is the ultimate content promotion platform. Forget Facebook ads, forget Outbrain, forget StumbleUpon, forget Twitter. It's 100 times better than all of those. I literally get 25 times more clicks on my link that I send out to my email list than I tweet out.
Interesting. Let's go in a direction I didn't plan on, which is the email list. Let's go into this a little bit more. I don't know if you know, I don't really have an email list. I had a MailChimp sign-up thing on my website for a while. There might be 150 people signed up. The block I have for email lists is I'm always like, it's going to take time. Like I got to write an extra thing of content and email people and manage the list. And like, how much time or effort would you say it actually takes for you to maintain your email list? Like how much time do you spend writing the unique content, managing the people in it? What's a rough breakdown of that?
It's a lot of time, not going to lie. But the point is that, yeah, it depends on the size of your email list. When I first started, it wasn't as much time because there weren't as much people to manage. Like now there's 70,000 people. Obviously, 90% of them just get the email, open it, click it or whatever. They never reply. But then you get people that reply. You get people that reply and say unsubscribe because they don't know there's a link at the bottom you can unsubscribe. You have people that just like every time you send an email, they reply and they ask you some sort of question. They're like, okay, they've emailed me 8 times. Like I need to take them off the list. Stuff like that. It is definitely time consuming. There's no doubt about it. So it's a legitimate concern to be like, do I want this monster to feed?
So what would you say to somebody like me? And there's probably a lot of other people in my situation out there. I have a business. I've got a good social following on Twitter. It's decent. And a few other networks. Like how would I get started dipping my toe in the water with an email list?
So I think if your concern is like what to do after they sign up and having this monster to feed, it's totally legitimate concern. Luckily, there's a way around it, which is the autoresponder. If you are a blogger and you post on social media, you probably already have content just sitting around on your hard drive, on your blog, that if besides SEO, no one's ever going to see it. So that's where a newsletter autoresponder can be great because all you have to do is set it up once. And if you really don't want to manage, like you don't want to touch your email list and you just want to drip it out, you could drip stuff for, once a month for a year, which is totally a reasonable amount of time to email someone. So they're a little bit warm and they don't forget who you are. So that's 12 total emails using content that you pretty much already have, just repurposing it for the email. Then it's set up, then it's one and done and set it and forget it. So that's what I recommend. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And now you've got my my interest peaked a little bit more in the email list thing. I've always heard of how good it can be. One thing I've noticed is that your emails show up in my main inbox for me in Gmail. They don't show up in my Google account. They don't show up under the promotions tab. Is that something that you've hacked on purpose, or is that just happened? Like, what do you think's going on there? How does that? Because obviously you're going to get more clicks and attention if it shows up in the main inbox.
Definitely. This is something that I studied and tested insanely, because when the promotions tab first came out, I was like, oh no, like a lot of people that have email lists, it was like, oh my God. And everyone started Googling, like, how do I get in the main, tab? How do I get out of promotions tab or the updates tab? Now there's like 5, depending on how you run Gmail. There's 5 tabs, but for most people, there's at least 3. The question is, how do you get out of the promotions tab? Well, I studied this, and the number one answer is basically it's very personalized, kind of like Facebook posts. So if someone really opens all of your emails in the promotions tab and clicks on links, it sends a message to Google that, wow, this person really wants to see this. We shouldn't be hiding this from them. So we're going to try to move it over to the inbox. That's one variable. That's the number one. It's basically, I know it's generic advice, but get opens, get clicks, get people replying to your emails. But there's a couple kind of hacky things that you can do that can make a big difference. The first is to get people to reply to your initial autoresponder email, or just to your emails in general that are obviously newsletters. So let's say you set up this 12-part autoresponder sequence for a year because you don't want to touch your list, you just want to build it, which is totally reasonable. The first email you send out, which would be the first one, you just say, hey, I'm Dan, I run Evolving SEO. Let me know what's your number one question about SEO, or what's the number one reason you signed up for this newsletter? You don't have to reply to these emails. I do reply to a lot of them, but you don't have to. But the point is, it shows Google that this person's really engaged with this newsletter. Because after all, who replies to newsletters, right? A lot of them are like no reply at exactly, whatever. So this is a total opposite of most newsletters. Google's like, wow, people aren't just opening, they're actually replying. Now that being said, when I first started using that would almost automatically put you in the main tab from then on. It doesn't work like that anymore. You have to really keep earning it. The other thing is obviously the content of the email. That's the number one besides the personalization. And the best strategies I've seen to get into the primary tab is not to have images in your newsletter, especially images that are hyperlinked to a page, because that really screams newsletter, right? If you get a newsletter from Zappos, and it's going to have all sorts of images in it, and it's going to have an image of a pair of shoes or something, and it's going to want you to click on it, versus a newsletter that's more personal that Google might think, hey, this is like a personal thing going to somebody. We don't want to accidentally put it in the wrong spot. It's not going to have many images, if any, and especially not going to have an image that's linked to a page. So I feel like in my experience, I've done those two things and they seem to make a difference. You can test this stuff. This is a great tool by Litmus. If you look up Litmus Gmail tabs tool, it gives you an email, and you can send it to this email, and it shows you what tab it shows up in.
Oh, wow.
And you can change the content of the email, send out a test, change the content of the email, send out a test. It's not 100% perfect because, like I said, there's a lot of personalization involved. But it gives you an idea of what types of content tends to end up more often in that main tab, which is, like you said, Dan, really important for getting opens and links. If you can just get your emails out of the promotions tab into the inbox, you can increase your open rate and click-through rate by a lot.
Wow, that's incredible. This advice to me is pretty remarkable because I haven't heard of that anywhere, and I'm not in the email space, but I think that's pretty exclusive advice and tips. That's
kind
awesome.
of is. I don't think I've ever talked about that.
Yeah, awesome. That at least I got one check mark up there. We talked about one thing that hasn't been talked about. So I want to tie this back into promo and tools a little bit. You mentioned Litmus. I guess for outreach / promotion / email marketing, are there any other tools that you really love, like Boomerang or things that help you manage all that stuff?
Yeah, my mantra with everything in business is to keep things simple. I used to be an SEO, and I learned this from trying to do the opposite, making things complicated. So whenever a new tool would come out, I'd be like, awesome, and I'd buy it, and I'd play with it, and I realized that this is cool, but it's taking me twice as long to do the same thing. So I've ultimately learned to scale back on the number of tools that I use because they usually actually make your life more complicated, not simpler. So when it comes to outreach, a lot of people ask me, what do you recommend? Like Pitchbox or Buzzstream or whatever. And I think those tools are great if you have a team. But for most people that are just doing outreach on their own, or you have maybe a handful of clients that you're doing outreach for, I think just a simple Gmail with Google Docs to keep track is plenty. And that's what I use. I do also use things like Boomerang to time the email. That's mostly I use it to time the emails. So it goes out when that person is awake. So you can see usually if you have Rapportive set up in Gmail, as you're about to send the email, it says they're in New York. So you don't want to send at 4 a.m. in New York. or if they're in Berlin, you don't want to send at 4 a.m. in Berlin, and boomerang, one click, you send at the right time. That can make a huge difference in your response rate. So that's the only real tool I use for outreach. Otherwise, I like to keep it simple.
Wow, that's super interesting. So you don't use any like tracking, like Yesware, to like see if people have opened it or clicked on it?
I used to use that stuff, but man, I never knew. The problem was once you test like a couple subject lines and you realize that the best subject lines are just super simple, it's just like, it kind of basically describes the content of the email, as crazy as that sounds. Like you basically just say what is in it.
Yeah.
You realize that without doing any crazy stuff that's going to get people to hit spam, your open rates are going to be pretty much the same. And then you realize, well, why am I testing this if it's not a metric that I can do anything actionable with? And then I stopped using Yesware.
That's awesome. I have a couple more quick questions, and then we can start to wrap things up. I was curious if you see any specific gaps in opportunity for especially brands or businesses for content creation. And when I say gaps, I'm talking about categorically like types of content, video, audio, images, or maybe platforms, like gaps in opportunity in Facebook or in new platforms like Anchor or like Periscope. What do you think is like an opportunity if you're running like a business blog right now for you to kind of stand out?
If you mean a business blog, you mean a blog about business, or just your business has a blog?
That's a good question. Good to clarify. You run a business that has a blog.
Okay. I think the number one thing is definitely in the content side. There's definitely opportunity in social media. I'm probably the last person to ask because I'm not a big believer in the power of social media in most cases, because it's here today, gone tomorrow. Like a lot of platforms are huge and then they're gone. Pinterest was huge and every business had to be on Pinterest. And now we realize that only a certain amount of businesses do really well on Pinterest, and everyone else, it doesn't really make sense for them to be on it. So I try not to get too hung up on like different platforms unless I think my target audience is really going to like it. Obviously, in that case, you want to go for it, but I wouldn't wholesale say like, if you run a blog, you need to be on Periscope. If you have a tech savvy following, then Periscope will probably make sense, because then they're going to be on Twitter. They're going to see when you start doing a scope. But most of the opportunity, I think, is on the long form visual content side. Most business blogs that I see are pumping out like kind of Me Too 500-word articles that used to work really well. Mostly they're doing it because they think that Google prefers sites that update all the time, which is a huge myth. Google doesn't care how often you update your site. If it's great, it's great. If your result in Google, if your page is the best result for that keyword, they're going to show it. They don't care if you updated 3 weeks ago or 1 week ago or 10 years ago. That page is going to rank. So I think a lot of people do that because they think that their rankings are going to improve by just publishing a lot of unique, good content. And I think that used to be the case. But today the opportunity really lies with that, not in publishing often, but publishing less often, but making it out of control amazing, hitting it out of the park with what you publish, whether it's a blog post or an infographic or a podcast or whatever, doing something really unique and different. I think the opportunity there is in long form and visual, and even combining those two things. So like having an infographic and then below it going into the different points. So then you have 2,000 words below the infographic. That is not just, I think it works. There's also lots of studies, including the one that you mentioned that we did, that longer content tends to perform better in Google. We found the average word count of a first page article was 1,890 words. Now that's correlation, not causation. It could be that longer content just gets more links and it tends to rank higher. Or it could be that Google has an inherent preference for longer content. I don't pretend to know. But the point is, longer content generally does better. So that's where I think the biggest opportunity lies.
Awesome. Great specific tip there. I want to hang on. You said unique and different. And when we met in Boston briefly, I had mentioned to you that I've had more people mention skyscraper technique to me as like this technique that you coined that term. And I think it's powerful in many ways. I mean, you've branded a technique, you've branded a tactic. What would you recommend to people in terms of like branding content? Like, is there any, I guess maybe talk about how did you come up with that name skyscraper technique, or why did you even think to name it a specific brand instead of like, this is the advanced link building technique by Brian Dean?
That's a good question. I think there's an opportunity there to name your content a thing. You have a great blog post on the Evolving SEO blog about this. to name your kind of, not necessarily a brand, but a strategy or technique or tactic or method that you developed and execute.
And for anyone wondering, it's called prop words.
Prop words. Yeah. See, so you did it. And now it's a thing we can refer to, and people can Google it and find it, because there's no other prop words that are going to show up. It'll probably be your result. So I think there's an advantage to doing that. There's a couple issues with it. One is that there's a science to naming it that a lot of people mess up. And I see people doing this. They create the lamp technique and the floor technique, the vacuum technique, the airplane technique, and all this stuff. And it seems like a good idea because, like, well, he created this thing and he made up in his office. I'll make up this thing in my office and it'll do well. And in theory, it should work. But the problem is, I had to promote the skyscraper technique like a madman to get the word out. So there's a couple of caveats with naming your stuff. One is that when you have the technique, you need to show people evidence that it works. One of the reasons the skyscraper technique has done so well is because the post where I sort of announced it was a case study of how I used it and got these results. I had a 110% increase in traffic from search engines in 2 weeks from using it. Then I had other people from reading that tried it, and I published more case studies showing that it worked. That way it has some legitimacy behind it. Because if you just name a technique and say, hey, you should try it, it'll work, you're not backing it up with anything. So it's important to really back it up with a case study. And the results don't have to be amazing. If you have the Red Rock Mountain technique and you lose 5 pounds in a week, hey, you're good to go.
Did you just make that up?
I just made that up. So,
someone out there listening has got to use that.
Use it. It's yours. So the results don't have to be remarkable. In fact, like, moderate results are a lot of times better than crazy results because they're more relatable. If I told you, like, I lost 200 pounds using this strategy, you're going to be like, well, I don't even need to lose 200 pounds. I don't want to lose 200 pounds. Or if you said, hey, I made like $50 million with this technique, you're going to be like, I don't want to make $15 million. I also want to make like $1,000. So you can make things even with moderate results. But the point is, you have to have something there to really prove to people that your technique works. So in addition to that, then you have to sort of go on a roadshow and promote it. And that's what I did with the skyscraper technique. Whenever I went on a podcast or did a text interview, I would try to mention the skyscraper technique whenever possible, because it was a great actionable thing for the listeners to execute on, but it also helped spread the word about the strategy so people could hear about it.
Awesome. So it had actual utility behind it. So you're not just like throwing out this random branded name. It actually has a purpose.
Definitely. It has a purpose that is like, and it describes what it does. So the science of the naming itself is basically, you want your name to have a couple things. One is some sort of visual element. So that people can visually, concrete, exactly. So if it's concrete, it's easier to visualize, which means it's easier to remember, which means it's easier to spread. If you've ever read Chip and Dan Heath's book, Made to Stick, they talk about that as an important thing for helping people remember stuff. And then obviously, if they're more likely to remember it, they're going to share it. So it's not required to have the visual element, because I have a couple other strategies like gestographics, which doesn't have anything really visual, but it's still done well. You also want to have it describe kind of what the thing does. And in the case of the skyscraper technique, it's pretty obvious because skyscrapers are always trying to kind of class each other by being the tallest one. So it's something that people could easily relate to. Is like, oh, okay, I see, it's this tallest building in the world, then 10 years later, it's this building, then it's this building. You can kind of relate to this sort of arms race that's going on. The other thing is to give it that sort of name, like a technique or a method or something, because then it makes it sound like, oh, it's a technique, it's a real thing. And it also has that intrigue factor. Like when you hear about the skyscraper technique, for those of you that haven't heard of it before, you're probably Googling it right now, because you're like, what is that? So it helps add that little information gap that's going to make someone more likely to look for it and therefore find you.
Awesome. Love it. Got one or two more last questions here. I really appreciate you coming on the show. I think this has been a fantastic episode with a lot of specific tactics and takeaways. So I myself am excited to go back and listen to it. I wanted to ask you did your search engine ranking study. I wanted to ask one question about a ranking factor that you mentioned. You talked about it's important to get a diverse group of domains linking to your site. Can you just explain a little bit more what you mean by a diverse group of domains linking to the site? Like, are we talking different industries? What does diverse mean in that context?
Diverse just means different. I mean, in this context, just different domains from just a study. But like you, Dan, I practice SEO, so I know that's an oversimplification, because if you get 1,000 links from 1,000 unrelated sites that are low quality, it's not going to help you. So there's some nuances there within it. Like, you want to get links from closely related sites whenever possible. You want to get them from authoritative sites whenever possible, or both is the best of both worlds. But the point is that according to our data, you don't need these, huge links from the New York Times or nothing. These links from these smaller sites can actually make a difference as they add up. And that's why I never, over the years, even before the study, I never scoffed at a link. I wasn't one of these guys who, if the site was a domain authority 15, I'd say, forget it, it's not worth it. And I never email them, because I knew that that was a link and it was from a relevant quality site. It would help my Google rankings by 0.00%. But in aggregate, as that page accumulated more of these links, it actually made a dent in my results. So the real takeaway lesson is, like, obviously, if you can get a link from CNN.com, great. Obviously, if you're in an industry like PR, and you can get a link from PR Week, great. That's a great domain. But if you can't get it from PR Week, but you can get it from 5 smaller PR blogs that are, let's say, domain authority 25 each, that can also make a significant difference in your rankings.
Awesome. And I think people forget to think long term and say, well, this domain has a 15 authority. In 5 years, they could have a 50 authority if that site grows in popularity. So you got to think long term, like a 15 today could be a 50 in a couple years as well.
Great point.
Yeah. One last interesting question. So you've studied nutrition, and you've also lived in a variety of different places around the world. Has either one of those things impacted you as a marketer and helped make you a better marketer?
Well, the nutrition part definitely has, because I wasn't just a nutritionist, I was also a scientist. So I was studying I have a master's degree in nutrition, and I also studied in a lab for getting my PhD, but I left out before I finished my PhD, thank God. But anyway, the point was, I was in a lab for a while, and it helped me understand kind of data-driven stuff, because in nutrition, like any science, if you try to come out and say, well, I think, so-and-so, I think if you eat this, it's really good for you, and I think this is really bad for you if you eat it, everyone's going to say, where's the data to back that up? So when I got into marketing, I was very skeptical of people that had these mantras or these ideas that weren't backed up with any data. So I was always fascinated with things like Moz's ranking factor study, which I always thought was excellent and is excellent, because they were one of the first people that say, hey, let's put some data behind all these assumptions that people have. So it helped me with the data-driven kind of side to marketing, which I think is definitely the future of marketing. There's always creativity and nuances, and things will always be important. But data-driven marketing helps you understand what works, and it also makes you a bit more skeptical about what people say works and doesn't. In terms of the traveling side, the number one lesson is that there's a lot of money to be made around the world. A lot of people in the States, and this is a mistake I made for a long time, was being super US-centric with my marketing. And if you sell a product that can be sold internationally, maybe you're leaving about half the money of your money on the table if you don't target internationally. For my online training program, about 40% of the people that buy are abroad, outside of the States. That includes a lot of places where they don't speak English natively, like France and Denmark and Germany and Spain and Portugal. We have over people from 45 different countries that bought the program. So, and one of the things is that I make sure that my language appeal can be read by people that English is a second language. I don't try to use $1 million words that impress people, because not only does that not impress anybody, but also the guy from France who's like, his English maybe not that great, or from Germany or from China, and their English isn't a native, they're going to be confused and they won't understand what that means. So writing copy that's really clear, and also when you hear from prospects that are from those other countries, treat them like you would someone from the States, because they have money just like people in the States, and a lot of times they have more money than people in the States, which means they can make great potential customers for you. So it really taught me that. That's something that actually, as I was traveling, I got to know Neil Patel, and that's one of the big lessons he taught me, and he's huge on this. That's why he spends a lot of time abroad meeting people, is because he understands that way more than half of your money for most businesses is outside of the States. So that was a very important lesson that I learned, and I'm glad I did.
Wow, that's super interesting. Do you think that applies to services as much as product-based businesses?
It depends on the service, because, for example, if you're a marketing agency and you don't speak that language, it's probably, you probably can't deliver for them. So it doesn't make sense for products. But on the other hand, if you're doing graphic design, that's something where that's sort of international. Of course, it helps to know the language if you have a Danish client, but if you're great at design, a lot of times you can deliver no matter what. So some of my designers are overseas. I have a designer in Indonesia that does great work. Probably doesn't understand a lot of the nuances of the things that I'm talking about in the videos and the content, but his English is good enough where he understands what he needs to know. So yeah.
Awesome. So we're going to wrap things up in a second. We're going to do a contest. And I realized I forgot to mention this when you and I spoke at the beginning of the episode when I was recording, but I'm going to record an intro and mention the contest so people listen through the whole thing. We're going to give away something. Brian's going to give away something very generously. So for the person that tweets this episode, I'm going to randomly choose somebody that tweets this episode of Experts on the Wire using the hashtag E, the letter E, and the words on the wire. That's E on the wire. And Brian, for the random person chosen that tweets this episode with the hashtag E on the wire, we got to put a deadline within a week of it launching. What is your prize going to be?
30 minutes of no-cost consulting.
Wow, that is like, you've heard Brian throughout this episode. That is a huge deal. That's like I would take 30 minutes of consulting with Brian, absolutely, and I do SEO. So I think it's definitely a worthwhile contest to give it to. Obviously tweet if you enjoyed the episode anyways, and was going to tweet it anyways too. But there's a little extra incentive for you. So, Brian, last question is, where can people find you? Obviously, they can find you at Backlinko online. Actually, I want to frame the question differently. What's next for Backlinko? And what's something that you're really excited about that's coming up on the horizon for you?
That's a good question. So what's next is that I'm developing a SaaS product right now. So it's a little bit top secret. I can't get into it. But basically, it's a tool to help people create better content.
Awesome.
Yeah, so that's what I'm really excited about. That's kind of the next thing.
If there's something you want somebody today who's like super excited about Backlinko to go check out right now, would it be a piece of content to sign up on your email list? Like, where do you want people to go next after this episode?
I definitely recommend that they go to backlinko.com, and then on the homepage, they can sign up for the newsletter, because that's where I share my best stuff.
Awesome. And I'm an SEO, and I think you might be one of only 2 or 3 email newsletter services I'm subscribed to as an SEO. Not only because the information in there is great. I love to keep track of what you're doing, but also just to see what your copy and everything, like just study it as a marketer. I think you can learn a lot just to see what you're doing there. And then finally, if you've enjoyed this episode, definitely give a review on iTunes. I would love that. I would appreciate it. I'm going to give a shout out to some people that give reviews on iTunes to kind of share that with the community. So, Brian, this has been awesome. We've gone almost an hour. I love this episode. I think people for a long time are going to find a lot of value from it. So, any last parting words of advice?
No, that's it, Dan. It's been a pleasure, man. Always
Awesome.
Good talking to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Brian. And stay tuned for the next episode with Ross Simmons. He's going to be, do you know Ross? He's going to be episode 4. Yeah, Ross is a great guy. I'm recording it later today, but we're going to pace these episodes out when they launch. But that's the secret, is batching, right? So Ross Simmons, episode 4. Stay tuned for that, and we'll see you next time on Experts on the Wire. Oh, and music by me.